Welcome to this video today where I'm going to be talking about advanced strategies for entrepreneurs who are in the 6 to 7 figure range. Now this video is not going to be for everyone, and the reason why I've made this video is usually I send out, through my email list tips and things like this, and although everyone enjoys marketing tips, a lot of people have said, Rob, can we have some more advanced stuff? So here it is today. If my usual tips are level 1 to 2, this is going to be level 3 to 4, which is the 6 to 7 figure range. Some of you in my audience I know are at the 8 figure range. You will still find this interesting. Some of you I know are just starting out and some of this might be a bit too advanced for you, which is absolutely fine because you're going to revisit this video in the future. And what we're going to cover today is topics that advanced business owners should really know about and should be basically working towards. And that is building a great network, the laws of human nature, psychology, how to learn. I've got my notes just here. This is why I'm looking down. We're going to be talking about advertising. We're going to be talking about sales, marketing, conversion funnels as well. All that good stuff I'm going to be covering through today's video. First of all, let's start out talking about how you can build a great network. So there's that old saying, it's who you know, not what you know. And to tell you the truth, it's a little bit of both. But regardless of that, you should be working towards making sure you are building an excellent network of people, because as Jim Rohn says, you are the average of the 5 people you keep closest to you. So how do you go about building a network? Well, I'm going to tell you a story about my uncle, and this is a story which, I'm so glad I learned it because it taught me an awful lot. Years ago now, when I was looking to build my own network and I was looking for different opportunities because I was in a career myself, I joined LinkedIn and I started connecting with family members I'd, fallen out of contact with, and friends I'd fallen out of contact with, and all this. And anyway, an uncle that I grew up with who had fell out of contact with, I always knew he was really successful. He always lived in huge houses, and this was 10 years prior to me actually connecting with him on LinkedIn. I looked at what he currently did in today's age, and I was so surprised because he was actually the VP, the vice president of a global multi-billion-dollar company. And for those of you who know anything about business, know anything about careers, you don't come to that position by accident, right? You have to know the right people for extended periods of time and be a master at what you do. Some would argue that getting to that position would be tougher than getting to sort of the $50 to $100 million range in business, just because there's so many things which are out of your hands. We've all sat in interviews or know someone who's sat in an interview and been turned down from the interview just because, maybe we weren't the favorite there. So there's all these external factors. So I knew I wanted advice from my uncle, right? I knew that he knew something I didn't. So I reached out to him and I was like, hey, what are some tips that you could give me about climbing careers? And he was like, I'll never forget it. He was like, you must build an excellent network because you are only as good as the people you know. And he said, to build an excellent network, you must, in this order, be interested in the top influential people and be interesting, in that order. So he said, to be interested, you must ask questions. To be interesting, you must have a niche knowledge of a particular subject which you can talk about all day. And he said that basically people are very self-interested and you will only ever get on their radar if you talk about them first. Now I've found this to be very, very true in kind of whatever I've done. If ever I've started talking about myself first, people don't really care, right? If you talk about other people first and what their interests are, you will end up probably getting like a positive response from them. So we are living in a world at the moment which is, you know, a little bit different than what it was 5 years ago. And the reason why is we had all these events that have taken place over the last 2 years. And basically what's happened is, although everyone's starting to go back out into the world right now, things aren't ever really going to be the same. People still work remotely. People have kind of hibernated in their own homes. You know, people are a little bit less social now because we do everything kind of virtually. And you must ensure that you get yourself out your home. This sounds super basic, but going forward, going into the world of, you know, Meta instead of Facebook, going into the world of like virtual reality, which is what they're trying to introduce at the moment, you must make sure you are building a network and sharpening that sword, which can speak to people and can recruit people to your side and build powerful friendships. And the reason why is because that skill in itself will be a superpower going forward, and it will give you a distinct competitive advantage over your competitors, okay? And I also want to just talk about Casanova as well. Now, some of you will have heard of a guy called Casanova who was, you know, history's biggest womanizer. That's what he was down with. He was very good with women. He was, you know, doing all these things. He was notorious at it. But really, if you actually look into Casanova, he was a very, very good businessman and very, very good at networking and persuading people. I just want to read you this quote from a book where he said, this is a quote from Casanova: "I saw that to accomplish anything, I must bring all my physical and moral faculties in play, make the acquaintance of the great and the powerful, exercise strict self-control, and play the chameleon." So this is from Casanova, who's probably the world's best networker, right? And he was saying that he must try to blend in with basically the rich, the powerful, and be a bit of a chameleon. Now, he doesn't mean in an inauthentic way, because people who, you know, have money, who are influential, who can teach you lots and lots of things, will pick up on red flags of you being inauthentic. Like, they are smart people. Most of these guys, contrary to sort of the popular beliefs of the world, they're not silly, you know, they're not stupid. They've got to these positions because they're very, very smart people. And so you must be authentic when you know, do this. And if you are doing this, you must continuously bounce from group to group to group and see if you can make a good fit there. Like my uncle said, be interested, then be interesting, be interested, be interesting, draw attention to yourself and start recruiting these 5 people who are going to be, you know, your biggest influences around you. People as well, I find, have a tendency to keep the wrong crowd around them. Now, humans learn from each other via like osmosis, right? If we are stuck with a bunch of, and this has been proven in studies and like research over time, like if we grow up in an environment where people are committing crime all the time, we ourselves are more likely to commit crime. If we grow up in a happy, positive environment, we are more likely to be happy and positive. So what we must do is we must understand this and start seeking out people who are in business, maybe, you know, 10 years, 15 years ahead of us, where we want to be. And we must then start recruiting those into our network as well, because we will start learning from them. And I don't even mean like learning from them in the sense of like they give you directly a piece of advice. Like, we learn through witnessing and being around people and basically forming our opinions. Even if they don't open our mouths, we learn from looking at their behaviors. We are so influenced, so we might as well have a positive, you know, influential environment around us by getting those powerful people in our network. And so many people in the entrepreneur world, they're all, you know, they're like too busy focused on, you know, my funnel's not working. You know, how can I get an extra % converting from my email list? But so many people don't realize that you aren't going to make a giant leap in your business to do that and to get from 6 to 7 figures to 8 figures to 9 figures. You need to not just be making incremental changes, but actually jumping up in, basically jumping up and changing gear, right? So that's what I want to say about networking. So the next thing I want to talk about that you should really know as a 6 to 7 figure entrepreneur is how people work. And you can only really know how people work through experience, through psychology, through evolutionary psychology as well. Also mixing in a blend of history in there as well, because people tend to repeat the same patterns. So the next bit of information I'm going to give you is going to be so potent and is actually, unfortunately, backed by quite a lot of different authors, well-known authors who are in like the evolutionary psychology field. So I'm going to encapsulate human nature into one single sentence. Most people are driven by self-interest. They just pretend they aren't. Most people are driven by self-interest. They just pretend they aren't. Now, there's an amazing world-renowned evolutionary psychologist called Richard Dawkins who wrote a book called The Selfish Gene. And one of the arguments he makes in it is that mammals, animals, creatures and humans basically make decisions around prolonging their gene pool, right? So they do it around trying to survive. So essentially, to put that into plain English, we make decisions around making sure ourselves are going to survive and making sure our children are going to survive as well, so they can continue to spread our genes. Now, what does this look like in real life? Well, basically, people will only make decisions to look after themselves, to benefit themselves. Hence why, if you are going to try and meet influential people and get on their radars, that's why you must start the conversation by asking about them, because let's just be truthful here. The cold hard truth, and it's a harsh truth, is that people just don't give a damn about you. If you don't give a damn about yourself, you've lost. The only person who's realistically, even out of family, even out of friends, that is going to bat for you in business or whatever you want to do in life is yourself, right? Because everyone else is self-interested, so you have to be as well, right? So another great example of this is evolutionary biologist Robert Trivers, who talks about in his book, The Folly of Fools, how we deceive ourselves so we can deceive other people. Now, what does that really mean? Well, have you ever been sat in a room with a person who's having a conversation with you and they are saying like a particular viewpoint, or maybe like their life's not going well, and like what they're saying just doesn't make any sense. Like, it's almost like they're lying to themselves, right? It's really common. You probably have heard this. Or, you've got like friends who maybe have flaked on you, business partnerships that maybe have flaked on you. And they're like, I couldn't make this. You've asked them to do a favor and they're like, I couldn't do it because, my dog got run over that day. Like, it's blah, blah, blah. This happened. I couldn't skip this. And like, by the time I actually saw your message, I just thought, I couldn't help it. And I couldn't make you, whatever it was that you were asking as a favor. So people deceive themselves in order to deceive others. And this is what like the whole purpose of the book is. A great business example of this is I made some content one day, some marketing, and one of my competitors, they didn't confront me about this, but they made their own kind of like response video to it. It was really weird. But basically in the response video, they were like, they weren't naming me directly, but it was obviously about me. They were like, this is too, this is way too aggressive. This is what's wrong with the industry at the moment. These type of results, it's going to be impossible to get them. This person is lying to you. This person is lying to you. This person is lying to you. And one of my network, called attention to it, and I actually didn't see this post myself. So, but when I looked at it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's an interesting take on it. Anyway, 2 to 3 weeks later, this person was pretty much starting to copy my entire posts, right? They were also doing exactly the same marketing strategy. So what really happened there? So they basically deceived themselves in order to deceive other people, right? And if I confronted this person about it, they probably wouldn't have been able to realize that's what they've done. That is just part of like the human psychology. Unfortunately, like, it's kind of well studied, this stuff. People deceive themselves in order to deceive other people. So you must understand that people all the time are self-interested. They are only driven by self-interest. And they will deceive themselves in order to deceive others. And so if you're trying to build powerful relationships and network with people, you must first of all understand that people are going to make excuses all the time, right? You're not going to win the first relationship you try and build. Secondly, you must understand that people are self-interested. Everyone is, right? And you must understand that to speak and to communicate with a person, you must communicate on a level which is at their interests. Because if you don't, you're just not going to capture their attention. And like my uncle said, you must approach people with being interested in them first, because nobody really cares about you. You can't go into a conversation and start talking me, 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 me. You will lose everyone in the crowd. No one will want to deal with you because they're only interested in themselves. Let's talk another bit about like why a lot of businesses fail. Well, a lot of businesses fail because of the personality types in the business and the connections and the relationships they made. So obviously we've talked about why it's so important to maintain a high status, a high group of relationships. But there's also in the entrepreneurial world, unfortunately, and in the aggressive career climbing world, there's a lot of Machiavellian type people who, Machiavellian means they are sneaky. Say one thing to you, do something else. Always, always, always doing things which are got their best interests at heart. And when they have the best interests at heart, everyone does, but like Machiavellian people, they hide it particularly well. So they will only be basically helping you out because it's helping them out. And often they are leading you down a dark path, which is then going to, come up against you later. So you start learning to actually identify these people by getting better at reading people. And you can only do that if you get out in the real world. You can only do that if you read books on personality types. There is an amazing book called The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. I recommend everyone read this. It's a friggin' huge audio book. If you get it on Audible, it's like 25, 30 hours long. But you will read that book or listen to it and you will be like, oh my God, that is blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah in my life right now. These people are not good for me. So it's good to kind of audit your own network by learning from these books and seeing who has these traits as well. We all have cognitive biases in our head as well. Misjudgments in the human condition. There's multiple different authors who talk about this. So for instance, we've got Robert Cialdini with his book Influence and Persuasion. We've got Charlie Munger, who, Poor Charlie's Almanac, he talks about the 25 cognitive biases. And I'd recommend every single advanced business owner read these types of books, but essentially what you want to be looking out for is that we all make misjudgments when we are making decisions, right? And we make misjudgments for a certain number of reasons. If someone is perceived as an authority in the room, we are more likely to listen to them, to pay attention to them, and to actually buy their products. If someone has the disliking bias in the room, for instance, Donald Trump, the media convinced the public that Donald Trump had the disliking bias, and they did this by continually pounding and pounding away at only the negative things he did. Even if he did a positive thing, they would spin it so it was a negative thing. And the thing is, when a person has a disliking bias about them, even when they do good things, you put it down to luck, you put it down to like it's a one-off, that's not who the person is as well. And the opposite is true for people who have the liking bias, people who can't do anything wrong. A good example of this, I used to work with this guy and he was a massive Machiavellian type. He was constantly sneaky around everything. He was doing everything to benefit himself. And, he was copying things. He was like taking other people's work and framing it as his. But he had a massive liking bias. And the reason why is he used to do charitable events. He used to essentially, just be really well liked by people, always be interested and be interesting in that order. He used to do these things and basically people just overlooked all the bad things he did. and still put him down as a good person. This is powerful, powerful stuff. Make sure you know your cognitive biases, because then as well you can defend against them. The media has a media bias. They are constantly pumping out a single perspective on something they want you to know about, right? Something they want a narrative to come about. And I don't want to get too political here, but they constantly have, like, the more eyeballs they get, the more money they make. And it's so important that they inspire people with more things which are clickable, like negative topics, bad spins of people that didn't actually happen. And you must learn to actually be the person who's doing the influencing rather than being influenced. We see, this is for anybody who denies that people get influenced too quickly. We saw it in all the events of last year. Something happened and immediately people started buying toilet roll. They started like pulling everything off the shelves and buying everything in mass bulk. People are self-interested. People are influenced very, very, very easy. People are very fragile even though they think they aren't. So you must learn that you can also be the person who's doing the influencing rather than the person who's getting influenced. And the reason why I want to talk about how to learn next is because so many people get this wrong. How usual people learn is they look at what everyone else is doing in their competitive field. They look at like what the businesses who are offering the same services as them are doing, and they look at people who are doing slightly better than they are doing before they just end up copying them, emulating them in some sort of way and getting, you know, a similar or a less result than them. Now, the thing is, like, if you are going to learn from people, you need to go right to the top of the food chain. Every single successful millionaire who has continued to grow has looked right to the top of the food chain. A great example of how this is done, we know Jeff Bezos, who is the founder of Amazon, you know, the richest guy in the world. If Elon Musk isn't the richest guy, it's him who's the richest guy, and like they both overtake each other like this. And basically, like, Jeff Bezos has a book on his bookshelf called Made in America by Sam Walton. And Sam Walton was the founder of Walmart, which was a billion-dollar company, and, you know, created from nothing in the 50s, and then in the 60s it grew, in the 70s it grew, in the 80s it was like a billion-dollar company. And Sam Walton would, if he was alive today, would probably be one of the richest people in the entire world. The interesting thing though, Jeff Bezos learned from the top. That is one of his most read books on his bookshelf. In fact, he even recommends that every single executive at his company, Amazon, read this book, and they read it religiously and learn from all the lessons that Sam Walton learned from. And here is a quote from Sam Walton's book. This is from somebody who is talking about Sam Walton and talking about what he was like as a person. Two things about Sam Walton distinguish him from almost everybody else I know. First, he gets up every day bound and determined to improve something. Second, he is less afraid of being wrong than anyone I've ever known. And once he sees he's wrong, he just shakes it off and heads in another direction. What does that tell you about Sam Walton? Well, first of all, learning from Sam Walton, we know he is an innovator. He gets up every single day and he's like, what can I improve today? That's a mentality that you won't be able to get from your competitor down the road who's doing 20 grand a month, right? It's just not something you'll be able to get from them. Second, he is less afraid of being wrong than anyone I've ever known. And once he sees he's wrong, he shakes it off and heads in another direction. Okay, so he has his belief, but he's prepared to adjust it in light of better information all the time. I look at all these people who are in the 6 and in the 7-figure range as well, and they have a tendency to have a belief in their head, and through pride, they will not shift that belief no matter like what the factual evidence is pointed out to him, no matter like how many times they are wrong. You must be prepared to look back and look at your past self 5 years ago and be like, you know what, I was stupid then. I didn't know how the world really worked and I should have been doing it in different things. But you will only get this from looking to the very top and understanding that for you to improve, you must be learning from the best and filtering your information by looking at the mistakes and the failures and the successes of people who are truly at the top of the pyramid. So if you're going to change your learning sources, okay, make sure you change it to renowned business books of autobiographies of people who've actually been there and done that. Don't change it to a person who, and start learning from a person whose net worth is only 10 million, right? Because the decisions they're making have only got them to 10 million. They haven't got them to 170 billion, which Jeff Bezos is at right now. So you must always be learning from the top and learning from those who are massively more successful than you, not just a little bit, because most of these people don't know what they're doing on this lower level. They just have no idea what they're doing. Doesn't matter if they're in the 6-figure range and the 7-figure range. They don't really know what they're doing. Maybe they are just copying a strategy from somebody who's slightly more successful than them, and at some point that might stop working and they don't know what they're going to do about it, right? Because they have only learned from people who are kind of around them. Now, what we're going to look at next is advertising and looking at right to the top for the best of the best for advertising. And one of the best is Eugene Schwartz, who was a direct marketer, very persuasive writing, who made numerous marketing books. One was called Breakthrough Advertising. Now, Eugene Schwartz made this book called Breakthrough Advertising, and this book is so valuable today because there is only a few copies in the world that you can pick this book up for $500 to $1,000 for a book. Okay, $500 to $1,000. That's how much that book costs. I'm lucky enough to own one of these books. And in this book, Eugene Schwartz talks about market awareness. And this is a fundamental principle of how to sell to people, because if you're selling to person A, you might not be able to sell to person B in the same way as you sold to person A. Now, we're going to start right at the bottom here, and I'm just going to describe this to you a little bit. The market has 5 levels of awareness of their problem. People only buy solutions to problems. And if you're a 6 to 7 figure entrepreneur, you need to understand this. So we've got right at the bottom, which is the worst type of people to sell to, and you're wasting your time if you're doing this. And this is customers who don't have an awareness of their problem. They don't even know they have a problem that needs to be solved, okay? If you come across people like this, I'm sure you have if you're in the 6 to 7 figure range, do not even bother trying to sell to them. They need to go through a few internal shifts themselves before they realize they should be buying something. They should be buying a solution to their problem. The second stage is for customers who are need aware, okay? So they understand they have a need, but they haven't even considered any products to satisfy this. Again, these aren't great people to go for your marketing. The next one is the next stage up, stage 3, is desire aware. And customers know their desire, but they don't know a specific product. So they have a need, they have a desire, but they just don't know, is there a specific product that can solve this problem, okay? Again, not amazing people to go for, but if you were going to go to this group of people, you must really emphasize their needs. You must really emphasize their desires, really emphasize their problems, and then work very hard on positioning your product as a solution to their problem. And the 4th level of market awareness are people who are product aware. They know of a product, but they just don't want it yet. But the best type of people that you can be aiming your marketing and your sales at is people who are problem and product aware. They want to buy, okay? They just need an invitation to do so, okay? So they need to, know that the price is right. They need to know that you are the brand that can help them. So if you can, with your marketing, find that small segment of people who want to buy a particular product in your industry that you are, selling to service a particular solution, then you need to be repeatedly targeting these people, sending out your invites to get them to buy. And then at the end of the day, it's as long as, they trust you, smaller things become an issue then. So like price, like brand, like are you a good sort of brand to be buying from? Are you trustworthy? Can you make them feel comfortable? Things like this. So remember, like the best type of market awareness to sell to is the problem and product aware. They know they have a problem. They know they have a product. Now this sounds super, super obvious, but most people kind of target everyone. And even if they aren't targeting everyone, they sort of target 80% of everyone. You got to just target the people who are product aware and problem aware as well. They know they have a problem and they know they need a product. They just need it to be like the right product from the right person. They're the people you will make your money with, and you won't have eroding margins of profit trying to target. So let's talk about now funnels, sales, marketing, all that tactical stuff there. And a lot of people, build these amazing funnels out. They have a web page. They will have identify their customers' problems at the top, identify their target market. And as you move down the page, it gets more and more persuasive. You got testimonials, then you have a buy now button at the bottom where people are eventually persuaded to buy. Now, the biggest problem I see with people's funnels is they don't directly speak in the language of their customers. They identify a problem, but it's not like a problem which is basically enough to get them to buy. And essentially the main reason why people have funnels that don't convert is because they aren't promising enough to their customer. They aren't offering punishment for people who don't buy. Like, what is going to happen if you don't get this product? Like, what's your future going to look at? They don't focus on the dream situation enough, like the reward, like, if you get this, you will get X, Y, and Z, which is exactly what you want. And people just don't offer enough reward. If you ever want to watch some amazing kind of uses of reward and punishment, watch the P90X's, that workout program that people do from home. It's called P90X. There's a few different types of ones, but the P90X one is the one I'm specifically thinking about. And that is where, it continuously shows painful events, people who are overweight, and then it'll show this is your dream body of which, can have all the time. It mixes in contrast bias, which is an actual bias from Charlie Munger as well, and it provides reward and punishment. This is what you should be getting in dream circumstances. This is what this is what's going to happen if you don't get it. So that is really the key basic principles to converting funnels. And if you've got funnels that aren't converting at the moment at the high enough percentages you want, don't be looking at the small, tiny, gains that we talked about earlier. Don't be looking at how can I increase by 1%? Look at how much reward have I got in there? How much incentive have I got for people to buy from me? And is the risk of not actually buying from me significant enough that it pains the person enough into actually taking action? You don't want to be manipulating people here, but you do want to be making your point that your program, service, whatever it is you offer, product, is much more worth than their current circumstances that they're currently living through at the moment, having these big dreams about their desired situation versus their punishment and the risk of not doing what you're offering. But always remember, going back to advertising, what we were talking about with Eugene Schwartz before in his breakthrough advertising, you can have all the reward and all the punishment with the contrast bias as much as you want in your sales page and your funnels. But the problem is, if you aren't catching people at that awareness level that we talked about before, the problem and product aware, they just won't buy, right? So I always give the example of We all know that Tony Robbins is a phenomenal speaker, and he can sell a room like crazy. People in his front seats are paying 10, 15 grand for a weekend seat, okay? So we know he can sell. And we know that he can use reward and punishment of joining his programs, joining his weekend events very, very effectively, probably in like the most effective top 1% in the entire world, top 0.01%, beg your pardon. However, if his market that is sat in front of him isn't problem and product wear, let's just say that like he's not sat in a room full of adults, instead he's sat in front of a room full of kids at high school who all they care about is getting high and drinking, right? And, you know, making friends and things like this. And he's giving these speeches. They don't know, most of those people in the audience don't know they have a problem. They aren't like product aware. And he could give the best, most compelling speech, sales speech in his life, and like nobody's going to raise the hands up at the end of it to actually buy the program because they weren't product aware, they weren't problem aware, right? It needs to be the right audience that you need to get everything in. And if you you picture it like a triangle, you know, you've got problem aware, you know, the punishment, enough punishment in your marketing and enough reward in your marketing if you do the program, and enough punishment like if you don't do the program, the product, the service, with the right problem aware audience. That's where like there's good profits going to be made. And it's very, very, very tough to match all of those things up perfectly. In a perfect world, that's how it would work. However, it's not a perfect world. Nothing really works that well. So you must use your sales teams or even yourself to follow up with people you've previously spoken to, because they might now be problem aware. Hence why follow up is so effective. And you can follow up manually by actually reaching out to people you've previously spoken to, or you can follow up automatically using retargeting campaigns for advertising and things like that. And if I had to do a too long didn't read version of, you know, what I'm talking about today, is make the foundational changes in what you are currently doing, how you are currently selling. Look at like the big wins, whether it's understanding human psychology, how people work, how they are inherently interested in themselves, making sure you're basing your marketing around this, making sure you've got the right network of people who are constantly batting for you, who maybe aren't as selfish as the general population as well, making sure that you're learning properly from the right people, making sure your advertising is specifically targeting the right sections of the market who are problem and product aware, and making sure your funnels are reflecting enough reward and punishment for them. And all of these things fall under Gary Keller's, who created the company Keller Williams, the real estate company, One Thing. And he said in his book, what's the one thing you can do this week such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? And if these are all the one things you can do, right? Getting the right network in place, getting the right knowledge, okay? In each individual section there, these are all the main things you could be doing. So if you can implement these things, you'll be doing a lot better. Now, I am going to be doing sort of masterminds and things in the future for very high level entrepreneurs, sort of 6, 7 figures, who want to actually get to more than that. And also, like, I am currently consulting different businesses and that. And if you enjoyed this enough and you wanted to speak to me, just get in touch with me. You can find all the information in my description there. If you want me to come and speak to your team or whatever, and see if you got any bottlenecks or what's going wrong, like, let me know. I hope you enjoyed this, and give me some feedback below. Let me know what you think. Let me know if this was like, you know, advanced for you as well. Take care. Have a great one.